Imagine you were running for your life from a massive fire-breathing dragon.
Oh, man, we've all been there.
Right. You are totally out of stamina. Your health bar is just blinking red, and you do what you have done in 100 other games. You click the left thumbstick down to sprint to safety.
Naturally. Muscle memory.
Exactly. But instead of breaking into a run, your character drops into this deep, incredibly slow squat.
Oh, no.
And you are instantly incinerated.
Real.
Just completely roasted. Well, welcome to the staggeringly ambitious and honestly completely baffling world of Crimson Desert. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled you're here with us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Today, our mission is to explore a detailed review of this highly anticipated open-world RPG developed by Pearl Abyss. But, we aren't just here to summarize a review. We're looking at what happens when a piece of entertainment tries to be literally everything to everyone all at once.
Right, the kitchen sink approach.
Yeah, and we want to understand how a grand, visionary masterpiece can actually be entirely derailed by the smallest, most fundamental mechanical failures.
That is exactly the tension we are going to explore today, because this game is fundamentally a case study in density versus accessibility.
Yeah.
It raises these really crucial questions about the limits of game design and user experience, really.
Definitely.
We are going to look at what happens when developers prioritize this boundless ambition over basic cognitive limits. Like, how much content is too much for one single experience?
Right. At what point does it break?
Exactly. When does giving you, the player, absolute freedom actually become a psychological and mechanical burden? We are looking at a title that pushes the boundaries of what an interactive world can hold, but deeply tests the limits of how your human hands and brain can actually interface with it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the sheer unprecedented scale we were talking about here is it's almost hard to wrap your head around.
It really is.
The source material describes Crimson Desert as a mashup of some of the absolute heaviest hitters in gaming history.
Oh yeah, they list some titans.
They really do. We are talking about the sprawling narratives of The Witcher III, the systemic freedom of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, the endless sandbox of Skyrim, the cinematic flair of Final Fantasy, and even a dash of the sci-fi exploration found in Starfield.
It's just a wild combination.
It's completely wild. That is a lineup of some of the most massive, time-consuming games ever made, all crammed into one single package.
Yeah.
The review explicitly states that calling this game vast is painting it way too small.
Yeah.
It's packed with such an absurd density of content that it borders on overwhelming.
For sure.
It's like going to an all-you-can-eat buffet, right?
Yeah.
And deciding to put the spaghetti, the sushi, and the ice cream all into the exact same bowl.
Oh, wow. That sounds terrible.
Right. It's either a masterpiece or a total mess. It's like trying to play a symphony where every single musician on stage is a brilliant soloist playing a completely different song.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It is an incredible display of talent. But without a conductor harmonizing it, it just risks becoming deafening noise.
What's fascinating here is the underlying philosophy driving this kind of maximalist design.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, developers who build these massive worlds, they aren't just trying to make a big map with a lot of icons to clear, They are actively trying to blur genre lines to an extreme degree.
Right.
By putting all those soloists on stage at once, to borrow your metaphor, they create an ecosystem that simply refuses to be categorized.
It won't be put in a box.
Exactly. It isn't just a fantasy combat game, and it isn't just a survival simulator. It demands that you adapt to its overwhelming scope. The developers are essentially challenging the player to find their own specific path through this maze of overlapping genres.
But, doesn't that inherently cause a friction for the player?
How?
Well, if you're constantly shifting between the mechanics of a survival game and then, the mechanics of a high fantasy RPG, your brain never really gets a chance to settle into a rhythm.
Precisely. That friction is the core of the issue here. A world without clear, defined categorization can feel incredibly chaotic.
Yeah, totally.
When developers merge that many distinct gameplay loops, they have to create underlying systems for all of them. The math running in the background becomes astronomically complex.
I can't even imagine.
Right. And while that sounds impressive on paper, the risk is that the player experiences what we call cognitive overload.
Ah, cognitive overload.
Yeah. You are constantly switching contexts, which requires just an immense amount of mental energy from you.
Chaotic is definitely the word, especially when we look at how this density bleeds into the narrative structure.
Oh, the story is wild.
It is. If the gameplay mechanics are a wild mashup, the story is giving it a serious run for its money. So in the game, you play as Cliff.
Right, Cliff.
He is a rugged member of the Greymanes, which is this tribe of grizzled, wolf-themed warriors.
Very classic fantasy.
Exactly. And the opening of the game is absolutely brutal and sets a very specific tone. Cliff's clan gets slaughtered by a rival clan called the Black Bears.
Unforgiving.
He gets skewered by his sword, cast into a freezing river, and then wakes up mysteriously healed in a province called Himond. And his only goal is vengeance.
Right.
It feels like a very standard, gritty, Game of Thrones style womp.
You would absolutely
Right.
think so, right up until you meet a random beggar who sends you to a technologically advanced flying island.
Yes, exactly. It is such a massive left turn.
It really is.
The source notes that the early game goes out of its way to establish this mud and blood medieval grit. There is an English language cast full of thick regional accents, and they are dropping liberal use of C words left and right.
Yeah, they really go for it.
They do. Specifically, the review highlights this very inventive, incredibly British-sounding insult, cockswagglers, alongside the actual C word you are probably thinking of right now.
Which is quite the tone setter.
It really is. So your brain says, okay, I know where I am. I am in a gritty medieval revenge story. And then, like you said, you meet this beggar. Suddenly you are propelled into quests involving floating tech islands, you are granted these bizarre superpowers, and you realize there is a much wilder, sci-fi-infused reality hovering literally right over this muddy medieval world.
It's jarring, but if we connect this to the bigger picture, we can analyze why the developers would choose to structure the narrative this way.
Okay, why do you think they did it?
Well, this subversion of expectations is a highly deliberate tactic to manage the player's psychology.
Really?
Yeah, by lulling you into a familiar medieval trope, the slaughtered clan, the river survival, the gritty regional accents, the game makes you feel mechanically and narratively comfortable.
It gives you a false sense of security.
Exactly. You rely on your past gaming experiences and think, I know exactly how this story plays out.
And then they completely rip the rug out from under you.
They absolutely do. And they do it because if you felt comfortable for too long, you might actually stop paying attention.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right. By injecting sudden sci-fi elements and superpowers into a grounded medieval setting, it ensures that you never feel like you have the continent of Pyle completely figured out.
You're always on your toes.
Narrative whiplash is often criticized as a flaw in storytelling, but here it functions as a tool for genuine discovery. It strips away your assumptions.
Wow.
You are meant to be just as deeply disoriented and surprised by the flying islands as Cliff is. It forces you to stay intellectually engaged with the world.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because that narrative disorientation physically manifests in the gameplay through a dizzying, almost bizarre array of player activities.
Bizarre is a good word for it.
You have your standard expected RPG fare. You are helping villagers with chores. You are upgrading weapons at the blacksmith. You are bounty hunting and engaging in this very meaty, agile melee combat with a ton of powers.
The usual stuff.
Right. But then, layered right on top of that, you have these completely unexpected, deeply complex additions. For instance, you can trade stocks and commodities.
Which is incredibly ambitious for a game where you also swing a broadsword.
Right. Trading stocks and analyzing commodities in a medieval setting. It sounds like playing Wall Street inside Lord of the Rings.
It really does.
You could literally go from analyzing complex market trends to wrestling a dragon in the exact same afternoon.
That's just hilarious.
And then the review points out other mechanics, too. You can arm wrestle in taverns, and it specifically notes that this isn't just a mindless button-mashing minigame.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there are actual nuanced mechanics and timing involved. You can even play rounds of rock, paper, scissors with NPCs.
And we really have to ask ourselves how something like a stock market functions within the context of an action RPG.
Yeah, why even put it in?
And why developers would spend precious time programming it. It isn't just a gimmick. In a world, this massive economic systems serve to ground the player.
Ground them. How so?
Well, when you have fantastical elements like flying islands and dragon riding, the player's suspension of disbelief is stretched incredibly thin. By introducing mundane, highly logical systems like supply and demand in a commodities market, or the physics of arm wrestling, you anchor the fantasy in a recognizable reality.
Oh, I see. It creates a sense that the world exists entirely independent of you.
Exactly. It highlights the ambition to create a living ecosystem rather than just a static backdrop. Pile isn't just a painting you walk through to get to the next cutscene.
Right.
It's a place with its own overlapping economies and physical laws. Look at the exploration mechanics the review highlights.
Yeah, let's talk about those.
You start by riding a humble horse, which is standard for the genre, but eventually you are piloting dragons and fanciful mounts.
So cool.
You are using sci-fi energy glaze to solve intricate environmental puzzles. You are platforming around floating fortresses.
Honestly, with so many chaotic systems fighting for your attention, the dragons, the stock market, the sci-fi lasers, the tribal warfare, you would honestly think the game would be a visual and mental
A total disaster.
a complete sensory overload. But the review highlights a very specific moment that proves the developers knew exactly how to manage that pacing.
Oh, the bridge.
Yes. The visuals of Pywell are apparently strikingly gorgeous. And early on in the game, there's a sequence where you have to cross a bridge.
Right.
But the developers intentionally force your character to take it slow. They literally disable your ability to run.
Which is wild in an open-world game.
It is. The reviewer explicitly calls it a cocky move by the devs, done purely so they can show off this beautiful environment they've built.
I love that.
And the best part, the reviewer admits the lighting and the scenery are actually worth slowing down for.
That forced bridge walk is an incredibly telling piece of game design. It is a testament to the developers' absolute confidence in their artistic vision, but it also shows an understanding of cognitive pacing.
Cognitive pacing.
Yeah. They know that your brain is going to be flooded with adrenaline and information. The stocks, the dragons, the sci-fi powers, the complex combat.
It's a lot.
If you sprint through every beautiful environment, your brain just processes it as a blur of colors. So they physically constrain your avatar.
Right.
In an open world game where player agency and freedom are considered the holy grail of design, taking away the simple ability to run is a bold, almost aggressive statement.
It's the developer stepping in and saying, look, we spent 3 years rendering the lighting on these cobblestones, and you're going to take 5 seconds to look at it.
Precisely. They use the physical environment to forcefully slow down your brain, providing a necessary palate cleanser before throwing you back into the chaos.
I love that kind of developer swagger. I really do. But unfortunately, this brings us to the thematic pivot of our deep dive.
Here we go.
Because for all this ambition, all this beauty, all of these overlapping genres and clever pacing tricks, this beautifully dense world is severely undermined by its own physical interface.
Yeah, this is the rough part.
We are talking about the controls. The review describes the control scheme of Crimson Desert as some of the most obtuse, confusing, and unintuitive in recent gaming memory.
This raises an important question, and it is where the grand, boundless vision of the developers hits a very unglamorous, frustrating reality.
Definitely.
Over the last 2 decades, video games have slowly developed a shared, unspoken vocabulary. It is what the review cleverly calls the lingo gamer.
Right. It's the common control language that has evolved over years of iteration. You don't even have to think about it anymore.
Exactly. The human brain relies on heuristics, mental shortcuts. In gaming, muscle memory is a physiological shortcut.
Right. Your hands just know what to do.
Yes. The basal ganglia in your brain takes over the repetitive physical tasks of holding a controller, so your prefrontal cortex is freed up to focus on the strategy on the screen.
That makes total sense.
But Crimson Desert seems to go out of its way to ignore almost all of that established language, forcing your brain to consciously think about every single finger movement.
The examples the source gives are honestly baffling. They have completely scrambled the standard FPS layout.
It's so strange.
In almost every modern game that features a bow or a gun, aiming and firing are mapped to opposite triggers. It is universal.
Left trigger aim, right trigger fire.
Right. But in this game, Cliff both aims and fires his arrows using only the left trigger.
What?
Yeah. The review notes, this is a ludicrous choice because the exact same input is tied to 2 sequential actions, leading to players constantly misfiring and just wasting their arrows.
It is a fundamental failure of user experience design.
And the movement controls are even worse. Like we talked about at the very beginning of the deep dive, the universal standard for sprinting the action millions of people have locked into their deepest muscle memory is clicking down on the left thumbstick.
Everyone knows that.
But if you do that in Crimson Desert, you crouch. If you actually want to sprint, you have to double tap the A button on a standard controller.
That sounds exhausting.
They have taken the most basic, frequent movement in the game and added extraneous, clunky inputs to it. And it isn't just a controller issue either.
Oh, the PC players suffer too.
PC and keyboard players are suffering from the exact same design philosophy. Commands are scattered haphazardly across the keyboard. Different inputs are mapped to the exact same keys, with the game trying to distinguish between a short press and a long press in the heat of combat.
That sounds like a nightmare.
The result is that between these absurd input choices and the sheer, overwhelming abundance of activities we talked about earlier, it is almost impossible to remember how to play the game if you step away from it for a few days.
Which brings us right back to the concept of cognitive overload.
Right.
By breaking the lingua gamer, the developers are demanding that your brain relearn how to walk, run, and shoot from scratch.
While simultaneously asking you to manage a stock portfolio and fight a dragon.
Exactly.
But, let me push back on this critique for a second, maybe from a developer's perspective.
Sure.
We just spent 20 minutes talking about how many massive systems are crammed into this game. You have melee combat, magic superpowers, dragon piloting, platforming, and rock, paper, scissors.
It's a massive list.
Is it possible that the developers literally just ran out of buttons? Like, could we argue that it is unfair to blame them for breaking the lingua gamer when no other game in history has tried to map this many disparate mechanics onto a standard piece of plastic with only 14 buttons?
This raises an important question, and that is a very grounded point. Button real estate is a massive challenge for developers making complex RPGs.
Right, there's only so much space.
However, while running out of buttons explains why the controls are complicated, it does not excuse how they implemented them.
Okay, fair point.
There is a fundamental difference between a complex control scheme and an unintuitive one. Mapping sprint to a double tap of a face button instead of the universally accepted thumbstick click isn't a space-saving measure.
Right, it doesn't really save a button.
It is a reinvention of the wheel.
It's actively fighting against the player's instincts.
Exactly. When you play a game, the controller should ideally become invisible.
Yeah, you shouldn't even notice it.
It should be a seamless extension of your intentions. When the physical act of playing becomes a barrier, it breaks the immersion entirely.
You get pulled right out of the game.
You are no longer Cliff, struggling for vengeance in the muddy, magical world of Paiwao. You are a person sitting in your living room, fighting with a piece of plastic.
That is so true.
By breaking the established lingua gamer without a mathematically necessary reason, the art, the gorgeous lighting, and the brilliant narrative pacing are completely obscured by sheer frustration.
So, what does this all mean? We have looked at the massive, unprecedented scale of this game.
It's huge.
We've explored the genre-blurring buffet of systems, the wild narrative pivot from gritty revenge to sci-fi superpowers, the layered economic ecosystems, and the absolutely gorgeous world.
It's a lot of high points.
But it is all currently trapped behind its own troublesome, overcomplicated interface. Now, there is a silver lining here.
Oh, good.
The review mentions that Pearl Abyss is actively pushing out patches to address some of these control malfunctions.
That's a relief.
So, there is real hope that these user experience issues can be massaged away over time. Crimson Desert remains a compelling, overstuffed modern titan waiting to happen, provided they can just fix the door to let you inside.
And that is exactly why you should care about this game, even if you never plan on playing it.
Really? Why is that?
Because Crimson Desert represents the absolute bleeding edge of interactive entertainment's ambition. It is pushing hardware, narrative structures, and design concepts to their absolute limits.
It's a pioneer.
But it serves as a vital reminder for any industry, whether you are designing software, building a car dashboard, or writing a presentation.
Right.
It proves that having the most beautiful product, the most innovative ideas, and an unprecedented amount of content means absolutely nothing if the basic bridge of communication between the creator and the audience is broken.
If they can't use it, it doesn't matter.
It simply doesn't matter how profound the story is if the user can't intuitively figure out how to make their character walk forward.
It really is the ultimate bottleneck. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talked a lot today about the lingua gamer and how incredibly hard it is to break established habits.
Very hard.
Think about the standardized languages in our own daily lives outside of gaming. Think about the QWERTY layout on the keyboard you type on every day, or the standard grid layout of apps on a smartphone screen.
Oh, yeah.
Are they the most efficient systems possible? Probably not. But we all know exactly how to use them.
It's ingrained.
When true innovation comes along and requires us to fundamentally unlearn our deepest, most ingrained muscle memories, does the friction of learning a brand new way to interact eventually outweigh the joy of the experience itself?
That is a great question.
We started today by imagining the biggest, most feature-rich world possible. But maybe the real question isn't how big we can build the world, but whether we still remember how to hand people the keys. Catch you next time.